start talking about what crop protection is, I just want you to take a minute and fill in the before part of your ballot. So it says here, should farmers be allowed to use pesticides? Am I not counting up? There you go. All right, and if anybody needs a pencil, there's some extras up to your Okay, so first off, should they be allowed to use pesticides? Just a yes or no. And then rate your knowledge. So are you a 1 where you really don't know anything, or are you a 5 where you're an absolute expert? All right, so just while you're doing that, this station is all about crop protection, and I'm going to talk to you about how that relates to crops that we grow here in Ontario. So I live on a farm up by Blackstock, so we have beef cattle and we grow field crops. So we've got corn, soybeans, zucchini beans, wheat, and alfalfa, and we have to protect those crops from a variety of things. The whole goal of farmers in Ontario and all across Canada is to grow safe, healthy food, and that food we also want to have a good yield. So we need to keep those plants as healthy as possible. When you're talking about pesticides, first off, are you guys allowed to buy pesticides? Can you go to Home Depot and buy? Can't, okay? So there are various products that are not that are used for maybe getting rid of some plants in more of a natural way, but to buy pesticide to spray your lawn with, the general public isn't allowed. Farmers can take a course, it's called the Grower Pesticide Course, and then they would take an exam to earn a license that allows them to buy pesticides to spray on their crops if they need to do that. But spraying pesticides is only one way that we protect our crops. There's a whole variety of tools that we're going to use to do that. But before we even talk about that, let's think about what we have to protect our crops from. So what type of things would cause harm to a plant that's growing? Yeah. Sure, insects are a big problem. You might need to use an insecticide to deal with that. What other things? Weeds are big, right? So this one here, and it's actually broken on me now. If this weed is growing beside my corn plant, what is it going to steal from my corn plant? Absolutely. Nutrients, what else? Yep, that's a big one. And now, what if it was growing in a wheat field, so the wheat was this tall? What else might it be stealing that wheat? Yes, definitely stealing sunlight. So we do not want to have weeds like this growing in our fields. And so we need to come up with ways that we can prevent having these weeds there. Other things we might have to deal with, and it's pulling off here now, this really nasty looking thing is called corn smut, and that's a fungus that can grow on the end of a crop of corn. So we don't want to have that there because the spores from this and the remnants of that fungus could end up on the kernels, and those kernels could end up in your bag of Doritos, or maybe in your corn syrup, or maybe in your dog's food. There's corn everywhere. So we want to make sure that these kernels are kept as clean and healthy as possible. So that would be one other thing. We might need to use a fungicide for the fungus, a herbicide for the plants. There might be bacteria. We need to use a bactericide to deal with. There are all kinds of chemicals that are geared to protect our crops. But that's only one way that we do. We use a program called Integrated Pest Management, and that incorporates a whole variety of ways that we can try to protect our crops. The first being mechanical, so that would be physically tilling the land so that we get rid of the weeds, or possibly pulling the weeds in some sort of physical way. It might be cultural, so that would be choosing varieties that are best suited, or it could be biotechnology. Okay, so if you look at these two plants here, this is a conventional corn plant. This one has actually been genetically modified. So what that means is there's a protein inserted into this corn's genome, or its genetic makeup, that makes it resistant to the corn borer worm. And that little worm, if it infests a corn plant, it can weaken the stalk and the plant actually falls down. It could mean we have worms in our kernels, and just like we don't want fungus in our kernels, we don't want worms in our kernels either, right? So it could cause those sorts of problems. But this plant is able to defend itself and protect itself from that corn borer worm without using any chemicals because of that biotechnology, because of that small change to its genetic makeup. It can do that. Okay. Another way that we can protect our crops is called biological. So there are these little wee bugs called aphids, and they like to eat soybean plants, right? And their natural enemy is a ladybug. Ladybugs are very safe bugs that don't cause harm. So if we introduce a population of ladybugs, they can eat those aphids, and then the plants are safe. So it's a win-win situation because the ladybugs are not causing any harm, the plants are safe, and we're rid of the aphids. If none of those work, we also have chemicals as an option, and it's important to know that in the last 20 years, the amount of chemicals used by Ontario farmers has decreased by 52%. We're using a lot less pesticide and a lot safer pesticide than happened in the past. Pesticides can come from a variety of sources. This is a chrysanthemum plant, so the chemical pyrethrin is actually extracted from the chrysanthemum plant, and it's a natural insecticide. If you've ever seen that Raid commercial where the little bugs are running and there's a big flower there, it's because one of the chemicals that is used in some Raid products is actually derived from the chrysanthemum plant. Other products are made in a lab, but some are from natural sources, some are man-made. Okay? On your question sheet, the question for this station asked about the way that farmers assess to decide whether to use a pesticide, and we use a method called Crop Scout. So that's your answer there, is you're going to Crop Scout. And what that means is we go to our field and we look at a little piece of land, maybe 1 meter by 1 meter, in various areas all across the field, and we would count the population of insects, we would count the population of weeds and the type of weeds, and we would compare our results with research to decide whether or not we need to spray a chemical or whether they're a big enough threat that we need to introduce a biological agent like the ladybug. Okay, so those are the sorts of things that that would all fit together for integrated. Okay, can you guys quickly fill in the after part here? Yes or no, and rate your knowledge again. Hopefully you know a little more than when we started.